Why don't you start off with
all right.
the business. We'll check on things here.
We will call this meeting to order, and as is tradition, I think we can go around and introduce ourselves. I am Arkady Goldman-Sorlov, co-chair of the Rider Oversight Committee.
Stefan Wunsch, co-chair of the Rider Oversight Committee.
Andy Reeker, as part of CTPS.
Josh Fabian, MBTA.
Scott Rose, MBTA.
Sophie Cloudhurst, Rider Oversight Committee.
Amy Long, ROC.
Jesse Saki, ROC.
Vidi Mehta, ROC.
Ryan Poligilli, MassDOT.
Brian Benjamin, public member.
Melissa Campbell, public member.
Robert Guptill, MBTA Service Planning.
Wig Seymour, public member.
Karen Lipstick, public member.
All right. We'll have our traditional public comment period. If anyone would like to make some public comments this time. All right.
Got it.
Yeah, I have one suggestion. We have so many new members. Could we either print out name tags, plain stock, or maybe list names on the agenda just for a while, and maybe put the usual suspects like Andy and Rob on? That'd be great.
Yeah, that is a good suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. Note taken.
All right. It appears that our special guest is not here.
Right. We can instead go into standing committee reports, which then may lead into the discussion that we were thinking of having instead of meeting with the general manager, who hasn't said that he couldn't be here. We just haven't heard any word at all, yes or no.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, one of our theories was the sort of presentation and review of prior issues and upcoming issues for the Rock, but you thought you also wanted to review the regional trail. Any particular order for that?
We could do this. We could do this first.
Okay. I apologize to everybody for us being sort of catching up and doing this off the cuff, because we thought the general manager might still be here, but we hadn't confirmed yes or no, so we didn't want to rule it out.
Yeah, I'll just tell you from my end what happened, because I was the one that's been in communication with his assistant, Mike, for seconds. So he was not able. He was scheduled to come to the January meeting, and about 3 or 4 days out, he was invited to go to the state address meeting, and so I said that they would come to the February meeting. I said I will confirm with you 2 to 3 weeks before the meeting, and so about 17 days out, and I sent Mike an email. I didn't hear from him until late last week, at which point he said that on Thursday, at which point he said, hey, I will get back to you on Thursday, and so I sent him mail today and said, any word, and if you're not going to make it, is there any statement that you would like me to make? And so I haven't heard anything. So when I talked with Mike, and he was very professional, very friendly, apologetic for not getting back to me sooner, expressed that he was new and was getting up to speed, and so, but I think he is acting in good faith, and so we'll just leave it there. And I would assume that when it's in the GM's best interest to get in touch with us, he will. But maybe this is something for the executive committee. But I'm going to suggest that we focus on some other guests that we have in the queue, because one of the difficulties now is that it's hard to ask another guest to come, because it's like it's a disservice to both parties, to say to one, well, if the other person isn't going to come, we'd like to have you. So at this point, I would say let's just focus on some other guests that we have in queue.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right.
Move on to this, or do we get the standing committee reports out of the way first?
Let's do this first.
Sounds good.
So If any late-coming Rock members would like a copy of this regional rail report that was put out by Transit Matters just today.
Yep. And I got a couple more as well. Craig, would you mind? Since you're up. Thank you.
Transit Matters has been working on this for a little while, but basically the idea is that they are presenting a vision for what is currently our commuter rail network should look like in the future, and what sort of investment priorities we need to have in order to get there. And the idea is to, instead of having a system that is built solely for commuters, for someone to drive in their car to a parking lot, park their car, take the train to work, take that same exact train back from work, you know, have the train parked during the day in the city, and then drive home. We could have trains that run all day, like the subway, at a higher frequency than the commuter rail currently runs, and additionally to have a much more efficient system with high platforms, which means that you don't need an army of conductors on the train to open and close the doors, which you currently absolutely need for safety, and to have the trains be electric, which means that they're considerably faster. So instead of the current 70-minute commuter rail ride to Providence, you would have more like a 50-minute commuter rail ride to Providence with all the local stops.
How we can pay for it?
Well, that is ultimately the question, but a big part of the program is electrification, and that involves basically replacing our current diesel commuter fleet, which is old and way past due for replacement with new electric trains.
I'm not even thinking about that. I'm thinking of the cost of running it versus what's happened to
Well,
the core system really needs upgrading. And you know, the bus system is not what it should be. So I'm concerned that money diverted to this wonderful project will not be spent on improving the bus
right.
system.
And I'm not sure how deeply they went into the finances of all of it, but right now we're paying a lot of money to run a system that is basically just for suburban commuters. You have this expensive, shiny train,
Right.
and you know, with lots and lots of seats, but
Right.
one person gets to use that seat. They
And
sit
the
in the
subsidy per rider is astronomical
Yeah.
compared to what the subsidy for a bus rider is.
right. Whereas if you invest the capital dollars to build high platforms, now instead of having 4 people on a train to run the train, you can have 1 or maybe 2, just the driver and conductor, instead of having assistant conductors.
I still think it needs financial analysis.
But yeah. Well, and additionally maintenance savings from electrification, which are considerable. Right now the old locomotives break down every 2,000 miles on average, whereas electric multiple units can run for 300,000 or 400,000 miles. So it would be literally 100 times more reliable.
This would also improve some core services, especially in areas that are underserved right now. A lot of this is about, one of the first priorities is the Fairmount line. So increasing that service will really increase a lot of core services. There's like a little throwaway in here about running the orange line to West Roxbury and the green line out to Needham, which are both right now considered part of the core, and then so that would improve those, like, increase that access. So this is a hugely regional thing, and it doesn't talk a lot about buses specifically, but there are a lot of really cool core improvements in here.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things is that you can fit a lot more people on a train than you can on a bus. So I don't have a good citation for this. I'd never really published the results, but I ran the numbers for if they just built a station at Newton Corner and ran a train, it would save something, you know, 3 trains would be the equivalent of about 50 buses. in terms, and with the corresponding operational savings with 6 people to run those trains instead of 50 drivers to run all those buses that are sitting in traffic on the turnpike. And the same principle applies to Fairmount. There are an awful lot of buses running on routes like the 23 that could be served by Fairmount trains at equally good frequency with much higher capacity.
I think piggybacking on both those comments on slides 8 and 9 here, I like a little visual related to overlap at Quincy Center.
Yes.
And if we're thinking about this as a one MBTA, the goal is just to get people as efficiently and as quickly into wherever they need to go. It shouldn't matter from the MBTA's perspective whether that driver gets on an empty purple train or gets on a overcapacity red line. It's spreading that capacity and getting people as efficiently in as possible.
As far as costs, electrification and high platforms would both significantly speed up service, which means you don't have to pay conductors as long, and you get to use your trains more often. They might make an extra trip, and both of those will contribute towards making regional rail a little bit cheaper.
So just a point of order for me. I'm sorry, who are you?
Oh, I'm Sky Rose. I work for MBTA, but I'm not representing them.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, and you too, so you're MBTA employees?
Yeah.
I got it. All right, cool. All right, thanks.
And there are also technical appendices, including a couple of examples for how the lines, for a couple of lines, including Providence and Fairmount, and sample schedules. So, South Station to Providence in 46 minutes.
Yeah, Katie, I don't know if it's in here or if maybe you thought about it, but is there a strategy where we could kind of build the grid first at enough kind of capacity, not like a single north-south rail, but the full capacity we need, and then incrementally do
I think that
go out, or
the strategy is to do it line by line, since the Providence line already has wires,
right,
and already has major issues with Amtrak needing more capacity. This gets the trains out of Amtrak's way a lot faster. Having the Amtrak trains take 40 minutes and these take 46 minutes versus 70.
One of the answers potentially to the financial issue is to just stretch it out and have a really logical scheme from the beginning of how long it will take and what the order of it is.
Yeah, and the reason the examples are Providence and Fairmount are that those would be the first 2 lines.
Yeah.
Because Providence already has the wires, more or less.
Right.
And Fairmount has wires at both ends. You just need to fill in the middle.
Yeah.
Can I ask what happens with proposals like this? I mean, I don't know anything about this proposal. I've been noticing in the last 5 minutes.
They all get built.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just curious.
So Transit Matters is just a group of advocates, and they're sort of putting this out because they feel like there hasn't been very much vision from the MBTA or from the state on what to do with the commuter rail system. It sort of seems like the current plan is to replace the current unreliable diesel locomotives with newer, less unreliable diesel locomotives, or possibly just keep them running as long as possible, keep overhauling them because they're still grandfathered under the pollution laws, so they can keep, giving children asthma in Dorchester, because that's cheaper.
So there is the Focus 40 initiative. Have you contacted Scott Hamley or anyone associated with that to get their input or how they feel about this? And the other part is there's a long-range transportation planning process which is going to kick up later on this year. So that would seem like a place where you could
Yes, there's also a commuter rail vision study, which is the MBTA is doing, which I don't know that much about, but this was certainly, the timing of this was not coincidental in that there's a lot of stuff being looked at, but I don't know the details of what Transit Matters is up to with official state bureaucracy.
All right. So then is there some role that you want us to play?
I just wanted to put this out here as a sort of, this is an idea that, that exists. This is a sort of complete vision for the future. We can look at it, we can discuss it in more depth in the future once everybody's sort of had a chance to look at it some.
What might that look like? Is there, like, could, everybody needs to discuss it, et cetera, but like, if this was clearly a strategic release, like if we decided as a group that this was something we were interested in supporting, like, is that something that would be possible? We can encourage the MBTA to take it seriously.
That's exactly it. Yeah. We would write a recommendation letter to the MBTA/MassDOT recommending certain aspects or all aspects of this, and that's the, I believe, the officially sanctioned mechanism for us to refer things to the MBTA by a written recommendation. Yeah.
So there's probably other folks who know more about this, but there have been some very large efforts, say post-World War II here on transportation. So the most famous is the Boston Transportation Plan Review, which took a number of years and resulted in the shifting of highway funds to transit and got the Orange Line done and the Red Line extension done. So those tend to be much more robust efforts than would happen within the T or within the normal course of things. Obviously, the Big Dig kind of blocked out a couple decades of capital funding without people going in advance just how much it was going to do that. There have been two very large finance and I guess maintenance reviews of the T that also had special processes and special committees appointed by the governor. I think to really get something like this going, you would need to pull in some heavy-hitting allies. It could be some of the academic institutions, it could be Regional Chamber of Commerce, but you have to marshal personnel assets beyond our current transportation departments. I mean, Focus 40 is a very measured, kind of small vision as it has been executed to date. So I don't think that would be, I don't think that's big enough to hold a vision like this, unless it's really, really reimagined.
What was the time period of that? You mentioned the Orange Line extension and the Red Line extension. What was that time period?
The plan review was, I think, the 70s. About then, half the documents in the library before it got taken down to make the new boardroom were basically Boston Transportation and Plan Review documents. Okay. And they're probably out in a warehouse somewhere. There are people around who participated in that and still participate in discussions. We could actually, that might not be a bad idea to kind of have a session with people like that that had participated in that scale of broad effort at visioning and then execution, and kind of have them recount the history. It doesn't play as well in Somerville because we got I-93 when everybody else got their highway funds transferred to transit. But for the region, people look back on it as the glory days of transit.
Who would be able to identify those people? Would you be able to help us to put out
Ann
invites?
Hirschfang certainly participated in it, and there are a number of other people who are still pretty, pretty cogent.
Is Fred Selvidge another one?
Fred Selvidge would certainly know about it if he wasn't a direct participant. He went from MIT to being kind of head of transportation in Boston and the state very, very quickly. So I don't know whether he was still in school.
Yeah, he's still at MIT.
Yeah. He's not still at MIT. He's teaching at Harvard now.
Well, I saw him at MIT
Well,
6 months ago.
yeah.
Well,
his
anyway.
teaching has shifted.
So, well, it seems like this is the first pass of this in terms of socializing it, right? And would someone from Transit Matter, you think, be willing to talk to the Regional Transportation Advisory Council about this? Because I think at this point you want to get, you want to get other people's feedback and criticisms about it, constructive criticisms, because I mean, anytime you put out a plan, there are going to be things that are good. Things that are bad, and you want to find out what people think about it, because if you really want to get support for it, you need to just get talking about it.
That's a good suggestion. I will pass that along to them. I was also trying to see if I could get someone from from Transit Matters to come and sort of give a presentation about this, but they were all busy today with the sort of official release.
That's fine. That's fine. But if you. We're on the RTAC, so if you would like me to suggest that as an agenda item, I'd be happy to do it. But I don't have to be me. You can certainly do it independently of the ROC or me. But that's actually a good idea in terms of things that we can do. Yeah. And in terms of time frame, I know that the focus right now is on the UPWP aid and I forget the other plans. So that's going to be like the tip. Thank you. And so that'll probably take the March and April meetings, but we can then get it into May meeting. With the focus being trying to get this into the long-range transportation plan, and maybe even a study, for the next UPWP cycle.
Yeah. I'm looking around for glazed eyes just in case the acronym soup is getting too thick already. Anybody want to know more about RTAC, UPWP?
Okay. RTAC is our Regional Transportation Advisory Council. I did say that initially.
Yeah, but can you explain what it is? A little bit about it.
Tell me what it is.
Yeah, more than the acronym explanation, like what it actually does and does.
So it is a group that feeds into the Boston MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, and so it is comprised of people of groups from the region that is represented by the Boston MPO, which is, I forget the exact specs of the region. I mean, it's Boston, greater Boston area.
It's like the eastern third of Massachusetts, isn't it?
It's
no?
Boston plus 100 cities and towns surrounding Boston. The model, and Andy gave us a little preview before. The model area is 165 cities and towns, but the actual planning is within the 101 cities and towns.
And it's comprised of people who are interested in various modes of transit, highways, trains, freight, trains, shipping, and public transit. And we're not the only ones that are interested in public transit, but we are one of the groups that is primarily focused on public transit. And so that's our RTAC. The UPWP is the Unified Planning Work Program. It's another initiative, yearly initiative by the Boston MPO, where they determine what studies they're going to do for various things, including transit, highways, and I would say almost always those studies have to have a sponsor. And so it's not like we can say we want you to do a study. We could recommend to some entity in the MBTA that it would be a good idea for that study to get done. And if they bought into it, then they would go to the UPWP and say, this is a study we want done with the details on how they want that study done. So anything else?
No, so generally the MPO handles all surface transportation. It could be walking, biking, transit, train, roads. And Massport handles the aviation and the ports. Now the freight, the road interface with the ports could come under the MPO, but the ports themselves and the shipping are part of Massport. And I don't mean to denigrate Focus 40. It's an effort to really do as much as we can with limited resources. I just think that this is a little bit different scale.
Yeah, it's a vision document, not necessarily planning document.
Yeah.
Thank you, Len, for all the explanations.
Sure.
Okay, back to the document. Obviously, I haven't read through the whole thing yet. Do you know if they talk about South Coast Rail at all and how that kind of fits into their plan? They want it out?
Well, yeah, I mean, diesel South Coast Rail is like,
Yeah, I think the thinking is that if they do build the sort of original preferred alternative of electric trains to, you know, via the Stoughton branch, that fits into this scheme nicely, whereas the current apparently preferred alternative of diesel trains via Middleborough is not really useful.
But that's still, that could only be a short term though.
Right.
And getting service established with diesel, albeit not preferable, would still get service instantiated, and then it could be retrofitted through Stoughton electrification. I know, I wouldn't believe it would happen either, but I'm just saying that the current proposal with diesel is not.
That is the justification behind the current proposal.
Yeah.
The other piece of this is South Station expansion, which is part of the financing plan for this is take the money for South Station expansion, don't have the trains sit at the platforms for half an hour, and instead get them out of the platforms faster and free up capacity that way. I think that's one of the things that still needs some detailed study to figure out what the constraints actually are. But yeah, if that doesn't have to get done, that is potentially $2 billion toward high platforms that benefit the efficiency of the whole system, as well as the safety.
I would agree to that. We need more studies. My understanding of it, or in past meetings we've had, when we've had Lynn here, and somebody correct me if I'm getting this totally wrong, the choke point isn't the number of bays, if you will, so it's not turning them faster. It's the limited number of switches in the like 100 yards out of the station. That's you have 20 ports, but then you get down to you go down to 3 tracks, and you can't
right.
down fast enough to
get
through those 3 tracks.
The other piece of that is trains have to go. You know, the trains coming in from the Worcester line in the Northeast Corridor have to go then across all of that to go toward sort of the Fairmount line to the yard, because that is what trains do. They come in, and then they go to the yard, and then they park all day. If you don't park the trains all day, they can kind of go back the way they came and not cross the paths of other trains, and that also frees up some capacity. But again, that's sort of deep into the technical details, which are not really in this report. And
if you go to a large South Station expansion hearing, you will find that about 90% of the speakers are North-South Railway speakers speaking against South Coast, including Governor Dukakis and most of the North-South Railway advocates.
And to be clear, this doesn't have anything directly to do with North-South Rail Link. It's sort of a complementary proposal.
It's almost conspicuously not there, but I understand.
Yes, and it's almost a sort of prerequisite proposal, because if we run the current system as it currently is with a North-South Rail link, we're not really getting the full value of that link. Especially if we have to then buy very expensive and less reliable dual mode locomotives instead of our diesel locomotives, which will still be diesels. Yeah.
How did it come to be that North-South Rail Link and South Coast Line are like enemies? This is like the second or third time people have spoken about them.
It's money.
It's always sort of been that way. I don't know much
I think we'll go into that a little bit more in the history section.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Since you wanted to mention South Coast Rail, we can briefly go over the history of that.
We'll probably do the last 45 minutes, maybe even 50 minutes of the meeting. I shouldn't say last, but a 45 or 50-minute period will cover a lot of background material, again, for the benefits of the benefit of the new members.
any other questions? And if not, I recommend you all read this, and perhaps we can propose doing something about it at a future meeting.
Yeah.
All right.
Again, a note of order for people who joined us late or just after we mentioned the first time. We're going off of a completely different agenda because the general manager wasn't able to join us today. So we're pretty much taking the agenda that's on the paper handout and sort of just jumping around. Obviously, the part with Mr. Ramirez is out completely for today. I'm thinking the next thing would be to go into the standing committee reports.
Yes, why don't we do that?
For just the sake of knowing who's been able to attend what, I mean, for the new members, was there a standing committee in the last 2 months, January, February, that you wanted to attend that you weren't able to, where we should spend a little more time for you?
So I have, I'm graduating this semester, and
Right,
I have,
that's great.
I have class on Thursdays until 5:40.
Yep.
And it's at Northeastern, so I can't make it to the I think CIF meetings that end at 6:30. I can come to the tail end of the MCOP meetings. I haven't been able to this past month, and I won't be able to next month because I have exams on those days.
No problem.
But is there a reason that meeting ends at 6:30 instead of 7?
Because we think that we can get all that we need done in 90 minutes as opposed to 20, so that's all.
Okay.
So far, we've been pretty good about that. I mean, if every once in a while we're run over a little bit, that's more of a function of starting late rather than, so that's it, because we assume that people want to have shorter than long meetings.
Well, traditionally, we've never recorded the standing committee meetings because during those meetings, very often we'll have special guests who are going to discuss things with us that are off the record, confidential, not ready for prime time yet. I'll leave it to the standing committee chairs whether you want to consider or reconsider that for the benefit of people who want to attend who can't. There might be an opportunity to record parts that are for, maybe not for public consumption, because the whole idea of the standing committee is it's not for public consumption, but something that's not sensitive enough that we couldn't record it and share within the group. But again, I'll leave that to the discretion of the subcommittee chairs.
Well, I mean, technically, we're a public body, and all of our meetings are public meetings. They cannot be off the record unless there's a legislative reason for that. Just to be clear.
Thank you.
And I mean, it doesn't mean that you can't get down into the details in some of these meetings.
Okay.
But I think that
Okay, so
we don't want to waste time on the technicalities,
Yeah.
but people should be aware that we're subject to both the public meeting law and the state ethics laws. So.
Okay. So then maybe it's an aspect of the subcommittees where if it's something that's not for public consumption, then we didn't discuss it. Or is that just, is that also going to flout the law? No?
You can't screw around with this if push comes to shove.
Okay.
You cannot screw around.
You can tell I'm not an expert in the way these laws operate. Okay.
I have a recommendation. Maybe we should put some signs out so people know where this is happening. So just sign.
Yeah.
I'll take that. That's a good note. Thanks.
So who are you?
Yeah, do you want to introduce yourself? You came in after we did introductions.
Yeah, my name is Chris Clemens. I'm a G writer every day. I live out in Worcester.
All right.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, normally for the committee meetings, we'll take a public comment period at the beginning, at the end. But I mean, certainly you didn't know that from coming in a little bit late, so that's not a problem.
Yeah, I was late because of the train. So.
Yeah, no problem.
Those trains don't run before 5 p.m.
If you're able to stay to the end, we have a public comment period at the end, and if there's anything that you want to tell us, particularly about it, since it's the first time here, I think.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. So hopefully you can hang around till you can stay till 7, or just before 7. But if not, you can always email us.
No, I get it.
All right. So subcommittee reports. Capital Investment and
I'm
Finance.
sorry, and please forgive me, folks. I'm not in that mood. I'm not impressed. I'm just struggling with a little sinus thing, so it's every word is through a fog. So Brian, so you said you can help out.
I was late, so
I'll hand over to you at some point, please. So we talked about the MPO, the Boston MPO Metropolitan Planning Organization, is in the planning stages for developing disproportionate burden and disparate impact report. Disproportionate burden is for those that are economically disadvantaged, and disparate impact is for those that are racially disadvantaged. And from now on, I'm going to call that DBDI. And so the MBTA has developed a DBDI policy, and so they want to develop one for the Boston MPO. They are asking the ROC to participate in that, and so I'm assuming that we will want to do that. In any case, in the planning stages, they're asking for input from me, and so and they've also asked if anyone knows of any group that they should reach out to be a part, to be one of the stakeholders. Please let them know. So you can let them know through me, or if you know how to contact them directly, feel free to do so. The persons that reached out to me are Betsy Harvey and Jen Rowe. I think they're going to be involved in it a lot, if not running it, and both of them are very good people. They really care about this. Having worked with people on the Boston MPO in official and non-official status, I do know these people don't give lip service. They don't just give lip service to the whole notion of equity. They really do care about it, so it would not be a waste of time at all. So.
Presented some of the work that I have at my job at CTPS is a project called the Community Transportation Program Development Program. So I need to do a little background information. The Boston Region MPO has 4 important processes that it's in charge of, and 3 of them are important for this conversation. The first of which is the Long Range Transportation Plan, which essentially is a 20 to 25 year time horizon planning document, and it sets out what the Boston Region MPO is planning to fund in terms of federal dollars and projects and programs. In that current version of the Long Range Regional Transportation Plan, there is a specific program, I guess I should call it, the Community Transportation / Parking / Clean Air Mobility Program, and that is a kind of a resurrected version of a clean air mobility program that ran years ago. We're trying to figure out what to do with it in my project. This project is tied to one of the other processes, which is the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, that the Boston Region MPO is in charge of distributing, funding year to year from the federal transportation agencies. And we're, along with that, trying to develop a program specific to community transportation. So this could include projects related to not just like MBTA service, but in more suburban communities, developing transit in those locations, potentially shuttles. Also as well too, we're taking into consideration pedestrian and bicycle access to transit, and also some other kind of just trying to figure out what the current state of the practice is for innovative technologies. So I think the FMCB just heard a report on the Lyft Uber partnership program. Also there's autonomous vehicles that are being tested in limited shuttle cases as well too, and just kind of understanding what's going on. We're developing this program. We're going to go back to the MPO board sometime in the next few months to figure out kind of a structure for this program and potentially what projects could be funded through it, starting in fiscal 2021, so a few years away. But my project is really working out and fleshing out what the details of that program are. So presented on that at the meeting as well.
Yep, and we appreciate it. He also presented that at the Boston MPO meeting earlier that morning. And I also met at that meeting Nicole Tischler, who is working on the capital investment plan, and she's doing outreach, and she is very much interested in meeting with us. And so I don't know if we're going to have her to CIF meeting, a capital investment and finance committee subcommittee meeting, or a full rock meeting. It'll really depend on what we have, who responds, to the March and April meetings, full rock meetings. So Brian, can you take over on the West Station discussion?
Sure. Yeah, so I think one of the things I brought up at the meeting this month was about general funding for capital projects at the T. West Station being in the news recently with the kind of the battle with Harvard and the EU for how much they should be funding. And one thing that stuck out to me there was the T doesn't have any sort of policy that dictates or kind of provides guidelines to neighbors about what the expectations are. So my recommendation was to develop some sort of policy at the T that lays out the framework, so everybody's playing by the same rules. Everybody kind of knows, what the expectations are, and also that it's at least vetted and it's fair to everybody. So we had some discussion about that. There's some differences we talked about with something like West Station or Assembly or Boston Landing that kind of underpin private development versus some of the expansion projects, the Green Line or the Silver Line extension. So kind of differences there, highlighting the need for not a one-size-fits-all solution or policy, but something that is flexible enough to pertain to the specific stations, but also the underlying expansion projects. So I'm working on trying to put something together for the next meeting. I hope to present it then. Any questions?
So we covered some of the decks that apply to, that were presented to FOCB and that apply to capital investment, finance, and I'll just point out one because we submitted a letter on this. There was an analysis done by CTPS of the costs and benefits of expanding the youth pass to people up to 25 years. I think it was going from 21 or 22 to 25. After the analysis, they determined that it was not significantly cost detrimental to the T and beneficial to the youth up to that age. And so they have implemented that, and so there was a general feeling in the subcommittee that was a good thing, and if we can get a sense from the full rock that you would support a letter of support for that, we'll crank one out.
Can you explain what you're talking about?
Excuse me?
What is that?
The youth pass?
Yeah.
So
I thought that was only for high school students.
Well, they expanded it now so that it does go up to the age of 25.
And require one.
Excuse me?
And require one.
I don't know. Maybe we'll ask them on the rock to find out.
So that's official, that the recommendation has been signed off on, or I can walk down the street and I'm not 25, but someone could walk down the street and get one today.
I'm under the impression it's a lot to get one today. I think that policy was approved.
Right. So the youth pass is provided. It's provided to social service organizations, and we give them to organizations that then distribute them to people that meet the qualifications that those organizations deem appropriate. It's generally my understanding. I haven't been heavily involved with it. My understanding is it's given to people who have completed a certain level of education, or pursuing education, or are pursuing jobs, as opposed to.
So it's not just like a catch-all student pass?
No.
Okay, that's an important.
Yeah. Serious distinction.
Yeah. This isn't an expansion of like under 10 ride free. This is an expansion of a small pilot program that you have to get through a specific organization. Someone under 25 can't walk up to the counter at the Charlie card store and get one.
That's correct.
Thanks, Rob. Very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, I still support it. I think the subcommittee supports it. So we'll discuss this some more. And if we decide that we still want to crank out a letter, maybe we'll do so. Bring it to you, the full rock, and if you support it, we will send it to the powers that be and put it on our website. If not, well, it'll just be an exercise in trying to come to consensus.
I still support, for the record.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Just to piggyback one thing on that, for folks who haven't been with us that long, we did put quite a bit of energy a couple of years ago into trying to create a university pass, a universal university pass. Chicago has one. There are some others, but Chicago's probably the best model. And it proved to be a little bit more difficult than it should have been, but it seems like a no-brainer that if all of the university students had T-Pass cards kind of just embedded in their attendance, you'd have less cars on the road, the parents would have less funding that they had to contribute. So that's still worth resurrecting. One of our members who's on kind of sabbatical, James, did a lot of work on that. And MIT has long had a joint ID, but the other universities, I think, still do not.
Well, to add to that, I mean, the youth pass and the university pass were being studied or
right
at the same time. I mean, so the youth pass preceded the university pass was taken over by Stephanie Pollock when she became Secretary of Transportation, and so she took that. And haven't heard much since.
Well, maybe it could be.
The timing to resurrect it makes a lot of sense if we tie it into automated fare collection 2.0. So the replacement of the back end of what we all know and love, the Charlie card. Because the idea with the new Charlie card system, which how many years out are we on that? 3, 4?
Since 2007, so 11.
No. When's the?
Oh, yeah.
2020, 2021.
All right. So in 2020, 2021, theoretically, you could tap with both the Charlie card or you could tap with the credit card. So if maybe that new technology will allow that you could tap with any university ID, and it would make that kind of integration.
It's a great point. There may be some other kind of unusual potential. Larry Backout was #2 person at MIT. He was president of Tufts for 10 years. He's going to be president of Harvard for 5 to 10 years. There's a lot of connections.
Right. And just to plan out a little bit more for the group, we were less worried about technically how to implement it at the time. What we were trying to do is build a coalition of enough universities that that they would all kind of jump together to say, yes, we will ensure all our member, we will provide it to all our students.
Yeah, it seems a little ironic that every university has done 5 sustainability plans and they haven't put transit, transit cards into that. So,
well, what little I do know is that I was understanding that the universities wanted a huge discount to the fare. I mean, I think it was on the order of 75% discount, and I think that was a real sticking point. And
they also travel at different times, which is helpful for the T. It's not necessarily the same rush hour, so it kind of balances the load a little bit. So there's a lot of things that got discussed, and that should probably be on the longer-term list of.
Yeah, and I think I would add, if our two chairmen don't mind, we're kind of go down the sidebar here, but if any of these things that are brought up sound interesting to somebody in the group, I think what we need, where we tend to do best is when somebody kind of finds a pet project, if you will, does the time and effort on the side to kind of look and research and come to an opinion, and then bring that to a subcommittee. And then you debate it in that smaller group, in that subcommittee, and then that subcommittee can propose to this larger committee that we should make a formal recommendation to everywhere. So if anybody, if throughout this conversation anything sounds interesting and you say, well, I'd love to resurrect that, somebody here has the details on what we did a few years ago and can share those, and you can happy to have anybody, happy to pass the baton on anything, and if anybody wants to raise their hand.
I could not have said it better myself, and that's actually what we're hoping to do for the latter half of the meeting, is to go through some old and perhaps still to be resolved items.
So if you don't
to
mind,
spark
Mr.
an
Chairman,
interest.
I propose I move on to my to the next subcommittee.
Please, thank you.
Were you gentlemen done?
I am done, thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Let's take a fork and laugh.
I'm run out. Like I said, I'm not depressed or upset. It's a shame, yeah.
So the Marketing, Communications, and Operations Subcommittee report. I'll go through a few quick items, and I am going to attempt to do this entire update without using an acronym. Is someone going to hold me accountable for that? So the first thing we discussed was the countdown clocks during delays, and what classified minor, moderate, or severe, and whether those accurately reflect what a rider is experiencing in real time. I didn't, I think I walked in a little bit late on the meeting, so I wasn't there for this conversation. Was there a takeaway there? Was anybody running with that?
I have notes, but just exactly what you said, nothing, no takeaway. Mild, moderate, severe delays, question mark.
So I think maybe we'll revisit it again next month and see if we can dig in that a little bit more, because from my perspective as a rider oversight committee, that if we don't feel those minor, if we feel the minor, moderate, and severe isn't giving us the visibility that we need, and we don't think it's working, that's an easy area to provide feedback that shouldn't be too hard to coalesce around. Next item we did was we discussed revisiting courtesy campaigns to see if the program should remain active and whether this group should call for future initiatives, or if we had any specific ideas to bring forward to the marketing team. So from time to time, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority does a...
oh my God, that's ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. You can say MBTA. We'll give you an excuse on that one, all right? Okay. Or even T. You can say T. Yeah.
Okay. So occasionally this this group that we're trying to help out, their marketing department does run these courtesy campaigns. You'll hear the kind of announcements to do this or that, but they tend to be few and far between. It takes them a few years to put something together. Does anybody remember the last time you've seen one kind of come through?
Wasn't the safety bounce the last one that was a campaign of any kind? I don't know about courtesy, but
so
anyways,
if anybody has, we'll take it. If anybody has any ideas for a courtesy campaign, whether it's suggestions and prompting riders to be more do things in a different way to help kind of the general public, it's the most simplistic example of reminding people to stand at the right, walk on the left on an escalator or something like that, or rear to work. Go ahead.
Backpacks on subway trains. I'm just going to put that out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I actually think it would be funny to do the opposite. In other words, have actors, or we could do it, have people shove on and show what happens. Have people swing their backpack and knock some poor.
One of the campaigns was like that. Yeah, one of the campaigns was basically, don't be
No, don't even say it. Just, people, yeah.
So,
Just show the picture of what can happen, and especially the boarding thing where people stand in front, nobody can get off, and then say, oh, we're delayed 2 minutes or something, but whatever. Anyway, I think humor always gets people. And it would get press coverage too. Courtesy campaign, yawn, Metro might put a little thing on.
So I'll move on to the last three items, so I want to make sure we leave enough time at the end here. I was thrilled this week because we did spend 10 or 15 minutes discussing my beloved Mattapan high-speed line, also known as the trolley, that travels from Ashmont Station through Dorchester into Milton and back into Mattapan. We just talked about the recent crash that was there, got some insight regarding the crash, and then talked about what was going on to get cars back in the line because there's so few cars in line, and then a larger the large rehabilitation work that's going on the trolleys, and then lastly, a study about the future of the line altogether that's ongoing.
For people who don't know, what the kind of cars that are on that line are the what?
Presidential class.
Conference cars. Presidential conference cars.
Presidential conference cars.
I couldn't get him to say an acronym. PCC, but yeah. Presidential Conference Committee?
Something like that.
Something
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
Maybe it was committee. But I
Yeah,
know
it's the
conference.
old ones for
Yeah.
you know. For
And the last two things we noted in the meeting were the Silver Line Gateway grand opening is scheduled for April 1st. And I think someone was going to look in to see if we could, I don't know, get a tour or something of that. So the president, the Silver Line Gateway is the Chelsea to beginning of the starting point of the new Silver Line in junction with the commuter rail in Chelsea, and the new Silver Line is going to go from Chelsea into East Boston to the airport, and then to South State onto South Station. That project seems relatively on track for a large-scale grant.
Yeah, the last I heard, it was on
By
schedule
bus,
and
but
on
no.
budget. Yeah.
And that's this year?
Yep.
It's April of this year, so that is actually, and then ironically, the other thing we talked about was a comment period regarding the commuter rail vision study, which is not this,
right.
but this was clearly meant to influence.
Cool. Not an acronym in sight.
Oh, sorry, what do we do with our courtesy campaign suggestions?
That is a good question. We found out that Dominic Trumbull, is his last name? Trabone. Is now the person in charge of what's called now the customer experience, which I think used to be, old customer service. So we know Dominic.
Yep.
And so I think we have Dominic's talk. He used to be in charge of almost technology.
Yeah, he was the, Dominic used to be the sort of the right-hand man to Dave Barker in the team of people who do all the real-time data and countdown predictions, etc.
So he's met with us several times, always been very open and welcoming of input, interacting with us. So I think that's good. So we'll reach out.
What I would do, bring them to the next marketing, communications, and operations subcommittee. And if you're unable to attend that, we'll send a reminder around that time, and you can reply to that email with your suggestions. And we'll aggregate them and talk about them at the meeting.
I'm going to go back to the opening of the Chelsea Silver Line.
Yep.
April 1st is a Sunday, and it's also Easter. I don't think they're going to have the opening on that day.
We'll find out for sure. The good news about that is it is 100% above ground, and with the exception of the areas where you can't walk because it's a busway, you can just walk in. I mean, it's a bus stop. If you're not going to board the bus, nothing is stopping you from seeing it. I'm certain that the ribbon cutting will be open to the public. Usually these things are, I mean, it may be mobbed and it may be hard to get up to where the VIPs are. But
They put an ad in the Metro the next day, because they really don't, for all the ribbon cuttings, they don't want a lot of people.
Well, what I mean is, when we find out when the ribbon cutting is, we'll all be able to attend,
Yes.
because they don't prevent people from attending.
No.
Yeah, you might not find out about it until after it's happened,
Right.
unless you're in the loop, but we consider ourselves to be in the loop, and I'll make sure that we find out. Yeah,
Just one thing, I wonder if one of the subcommittees might think about this. There's been a lot of accidents lately, and some of them have been pretty serious. And Jeff Gonaville is really terrific if you get him to a meeting and he's candid about what's going on. So I don't know, at some point it may be worth chatting with him about his view of the state of repair.
that's a very good point.
I had a question too about that subline thing to Chelsea. Is it going to be free like the subline to the airport, or is it going to be charged?
No, I don't know the answer to that.
As far as I know, it's a standard bus charge, standard bus fare.
Subway fare.
Subway.
It's Subway. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm glad you were here to correct that.
It's on the map.
It's only free when you're coming from Logan. It's not free going there, right?
Yes.
Right.
So the same would apply. The same would apply. Oh, no, that's an important
Yeah, that's very important. Is Massport going to be subsidizing one of the directions on the Chelsea line?
There's a subtle difference with this one, I believe. And what do you guys correct me on this? SL1. Oh, I just didn't know. The Silver Line 1. SL1, that's the name of the route. It is not. It is the official name of the route is SL1, correct? There is no
Silver Line 1.
We're just trying to leave a lot of this.
Silver Line 1.
Also said on the map, Silver Line 3.
Yes. So, the current Silver Lines that go to the SL1 goes and stops at all the terminals. The Chelsea line will not be stopping at all the terminals. It goes to Airport Station, the Blue Line station, where you can transfer to a bus that does the Logan Loop. That's the difference. So it doesn't actually, it won't pick up at terminals, and therefore won't be free because it's not picking up terminals.
So it's like less to the airport and more just to the Blue Line?
Correct. It is to Airport Station. There's a really, we actually had an argument. I got upset about it. Was that you about that? Yeah, I'm strong. Did I say you're wrong? Just because you're probably in front of me. I wanted the team to be clear that you can't say destination airport and people are thinking, oh, I'm going to go to the airport.
Well,
and you're actually end up
yeah.
at a Blue Line station on the outskirts of the airport. But not be as exciting as being making terminal, being in your terminal.
But being a North Shore commuter rail rider, I know that anyone who lives on the Newburyport-Rockport lines wants to hear that advertised as a connection to the airport, because the only other alternative is either to drive or Uber to Wonderland or take the commuter rail to North Station and then fight through the downtown congestion on the subway. So as far as commuter rail North Shore goes, yeah, advertising it as an airport connection is valid.
I think it also would be less of a problem if the trip by the SL1 was subsidized both ways, because then there wouldn't be any sort of financial thing doing that.
Is there going to be a stop off the Chelsea stop?
Oh yeah. I think there's 5 total, including the airport station.
No, off the commuter rail.
Oh yeah. The very outer Silver Line stop is going to be right at the Chelsea station, and then at some point later there's going to be a complete rebuild, and there'll be a multimodal new commuter rail station built.
Chelsea.
Yep. Yeah, but I think for the next 2 to 3 years at least, it'll just be the current kind of cruddy Chelsea commuter rail platform, and then maybe, I think it's about a half a block away or maybe a block away is the new Silver Line pickup. No, I lied. There is a temporary Silver Line right next to the commuter rail stop. Right.
You want to keep us moving? You want
Absolutely. Yep.
You said 50
You're all
minutes
set?
and we have...
Any more on the subcommittee room?
All set.
Okay, great. I'm going to start passing this, just pass around in each direction. I printed 25, so I think that should cover everybody at the table, even people who are not committee members. I'm not concerned. If there's any extras, Barry, you can pass them out to people. 25 should cover everybody. Yeah, Carl.
Are you doing the extra meetings later?
I'm sorry?
Are you doing the extra meetings later?
Any preference for talking about external meetings and such now? We can.
It wasn't a request, I just, since we didn't have.
Well, tell you what, let's do that now while the papers are going around so we don't forget. Do you want to talk about something?
Yeah, there were two things that I wanted to mention from external meetings. One at the Fiscal and Management Control Board, FNCB meeting yesterday. There was an announcement of the thing that has been called the service planning.
Oh, yay!
Is now, or has the name Better Bus Project, and a logo and other things, and that the public, that the announcements about schedules and things are supposed to happen in the next week or so, I believe. And they talked a lot about the work that they've been doing with municipalities and with bus planning or service planning organization, and I think folks in MassDOT, to analyze routes as they exist and bottlenecks and a lot of stuff like that. But they're planning to have people on the streets doing public engagement starting in April, I believe.
So you think somehow I heard the announcement of the meetings will be next week.
I think so.
Anyway,
I think the announcement of the plan.
But not the actual meeting things will not be next week.
I don't believe so.
Good.
But I wanted to ask you guys to consider inviting Wes Edwards as a potential person here, or maybe at the marketing subcommittee or marketing operations subcommittee meeting to talk about what's going on there, what's in scope, what's out of scope, what are priorities, things like that.
Yeah. Craig, what do you think? Is that more for a subcommittee?
Yes. As someone who was looking at their phone, not paying attention for a minute. Apologies. Yeah.
That's all right.
I'll follow up online with you.
Yeah, Carl, if you can get Craig that person's name.
It's Wes Edwards.
Wes Edwards. Okay. That's a great one.
His email address too.
I just want to see the Better Bus logo.
Better Bus Project. Yeah, you'll see it soon. I can draw it for you.
Yeah, that is great news. Nobody in the room is happier than Karen about the service plan process starting. I'll tell you that.
And probably Rob, because I won't nag him anymore.
And there was an interesting thing. There was a little report in Jeff Gonaville's about the Silver Line performance and delays at D Street because they had retimed the traffic signals there. So if you're interested in Silver Line and traffic signals and delays, that's out there. So that was FMCB. The other thing I was going to mention related to the unified UPWP.
Unified Planning Work Program.
Is that they proposed 12 one-time studies along with 3 recurring studies, and there's one in particular that I'd encourage us to ask them to do soon or in this round, which is M5, New and Emerging Metrics for Roadway Usage. The idea is to define measures and ways of measuring that emphasize, among other things, emphasize moving people as opposed to moving vehicles. And then with those measures, they'd be able to use those for decisions about what to fund. And so presumably with that, funding would go towards more towards moving people than to moving vehicles. I can write that up.
Please. Thank you very much.
That's it. Thanks.
Anyone else want to mention outside meeting, something that you attended that's not a ROC meeting? Okay. I don't actually have a copy of the agenda in front of me. So are we missing anything other than issues review, which involves that handout and public comments at the end? I think we covered everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, unless anybody has anything else from old/new business.
Well, thinking about it just for the subcommittee, I did check, because I just told people to bring their ideas for courtesy campaigns to the next meeting. The next marketing communication operations meeting is actually this coming, is a week from Thursday, because it is the second Thursday of the month. Yep. And because we flip over, because it's a short month, first Thursday is this Thursday, so it's a week from Thursday.
Right, which means that the capital.
Capital is the third Thursday. We changed it.
Oh, okay. I missed that. Okay.
It was changed.
Great.
I should say, I didn't say we changed it. It was changed.
Okay, so after tonight, the next meeting is in roughly 10 days for marketing communications. Thank you. Okay, without any further ado, my theory, or Arcadia and our theory about the remainder of the meeting is, again, under the theme of setting a spark under somebody who may be a new member, as well as doing a bit of a review of things that we've covered in the ROC in the past and may still have outstanding issues, may need to be revisited. We're constantly wanting to reevaluate our priorities and make sure that if someone's interested in something, of course, then that's where we take a subcommittee or the full committee. And particularly if we're missing, if we're an issue that is, say, needs to be revisited, we want to make sure that we do that in a timely manner and don't let something just sit on the back burner. So this handout, which I reviewed with Arkady, is, again, in no particular order, but are things that were significant topics that the ROC has covered, which I thought were worthy of reviewing, again, mostly, or if not primarily, for the benefit of new people, so that you know what happened and where you might want to take it or where we should take it in the future. So right off the top, if you're not familiar with the automatic passenger counting on commuter rail, this was an effort that was, I think, even before AFC 2.0 was fully thought out as a project. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's independent, yeah. It originally started with video cameras on a platform at South Station that had software behind them where the system could actually pick a person, not identifying like you as Fred so-and-so, but just as a blob that's a human, and identify if you're moving towards the train or coming off the train. And it was apparently reliable enough that it gave the MBTA passenger counts all electronically that could tell how many people came off, how many people got on a particular train. That was enough of a success that they expanded it to automatic passenger counting for an entire commuter rail set. There's a set of, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 8. There's now 2 full sets. That's fantastic. I only knew of 1. So apparently it's 2 full sets of, I think, is it 7 cards each?
I don't remember.
I don't remember the exact number, but
there's details and an update about that in yesterday's FMCB meeting.
You're kidding. I didn't see that yet. Okay. The camera and the software setup can identify people boarding the train and is able to actually identify somebody who's moving through the train, so that just because somebody has gone from one end of the coach to another end of the coach doesn't trigger the getting on or getting off. So somebody who's like wearing a blue striped shirt, if I got on at one end and walked all the way to the end, at the other end of the train but stayed on, it would know that I was still on board, and it wouldn't actually catch me until the guy with the blue striped shirt went off the train, actually got out of the door. That's something that should allow for, I think, I talked to the engineer on the train who was responsible for this. Its accuracy is in the 90s at least, and apparently the manual way of counting that conductors used to do for decades had accuracies that were far, far lower. I don't want to say a number, I don't know if there was a number put to it, but the idea being that for the first time in decades, commuter rail will have ridership numbers, not all the time, every time, until we get new coaches some next round in the far future. But once the sets have gone around, we'll have accurate numbers, samples of every line. Go ahead.
And along those lines, Grabowska said, I forget the figure, how many tens of thousands of dollars to equip each passenger car, but it didn't require new fleet, just required spending the tens of thousands of dollars to equip them. And he encouraged the agency to do that, but that's another thing from the discussion yesterday.
That's great. Dan Grabowskis, former general manager of the T, is on our short list of people to have as guests in the future.
And that's used for what?
Well, the goal is to have accurate ridership counts for every mode and every line, so that you know where you're adequately or inadequately serving that ridership.
What's going to happen? I mean, when everything's electronic, you're going to know, not when you're buying with tickets electronically solely. Why would you have that information
That's a good point.
Well,
Rob,
suppose, given the number of people who use passes, they just show their pass. What train are they on? Nobody, you know, if they just have a pass, nobody knows.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking that.
Does anyone?
Generally, they're gonna have, even for the passes, you're gonna just swipe.
I mean.
Yeah. Well, from a service planning perspective, did you, or were you thinking that the AFC2 data would be all that you needed, or is the automatic passenger counting going to be an important part of future service planning? Or it may be, it's commuter rail, so you may not be directly involved?
I'm not heavily involved in it,
okay.
But I can certainly speak for buses.
Please.
We use the automated fare collection system. Certainly, we use that for revenue collection primarily.
Yeah.
You can do ridership estimation from it, but then you have to do some estimate of what level of non-interaction with the fare collection system is occurring. You actually employ CPS to do that for us too. We could estimate changes from various modes, but for some modes, Green Line, where non-interaction is quite high, versus the buses versus the gated system. So we certainly look at, particularly for buses, we look at the APCs, the automatic on-person counters, as being a much more reliable form of passenger counting. That being said, we use the AFC, the automated fare collection system, for its uses of origin and destination information. So there are two different tools that both of their uses, both of their problems too, I should say, and we kind of use them to compare against one another.
Yeah. So the evolution of automatic passenger counting is continuing. So again, that's why I wanted to mention it tonight. So if it's something worth investigating, new members particularly, if it's interesting to you, we should follow up on it. Yeah.
Do you expect those two to converge, the person counting and the fare collection?
I mean, we consistently see differences between them, and one would expect there to be differences just based on the purpose of the fare collection system being a revenue system versus the person counters being a counting.
Right, but I guess what I'm asking is, will there be technological overlap between the two?
You're thinking that new Amazon grocery store where people don't even have to pay.
Well, I think I can answer that. I don't know. If the ultimate application of AFC 2.0 on commuter rail does not require a tap out, then I think yes, the APC system will still would be vital. Because knowing where people disembark would be not captured otherwise.
So just on that, I mean, I probably said this before, but I think knowing where individuals get on and off, not necessarily knowing the person, but knowing the trip started is extremely helpful.
Right. Well, I'll transition to AFC 2.0, which I believe is also on this list. One of the aspects of AFC 2.0 that is going to be very important. If I missed it on this list, that doesn't mean it wasn't important, but as Wig was just saying, getting the boarding and the disembarking, or alighting, is that the right term? Yeah. Getting the full trip data is something that we don't do now. So getting that for every trip on every mode is going to be a huge improvement to being able to model the trips, being able to model times, delays. I mean, even knowing if somebody got onto a bus at a certain time, then got off of the bus at a certain time, well, how long did that, then you've got more information about what that customer experience was. You may have already known how long the bus took to get from point A to point B, but if it affects one particular person,
and
even better to know.
The new vendor does that in Sydney already. Maybe some of the other systems. They have all tap on, tap off, so they're getting that data.
That's great.
I'll just say, my understanding is that in terms of tap on, tap off, there's been no decision made whether to do that or to not do that for the bus and the heavy rail, the subway system. Commuter rail, that is what we need. It's what we need to do for commuter rail. So that would be the system for commuter rail.
Very good. Just continue on down the list. I think I mentioned before about the thought of having a user's guide to the MBTA. A big part of that could be the do's and don'ts. Don't stand in the doorway. But then going beyond that and just saying, well, why? Tell people, don't do this, but here's why not. or do something this way, and here's why. The what's in it for me factor, I think, just speaking for myself, the what's in it for me factor of MBTA user experience is really forgotten. I mean, people say don't do this, but why and how, what one person's behavior can, what one person's behavior has, that plays in the bigger picture, I think is overlooked. So again, I'm hoping to, at some point, revisit the idea of a user's guide that has these do's and don'ts and ways of encouraging and fostering better behavior, including safety. We have a new, I don't think Ron Nickel, Chief Safety Officer, is retired, but we have an additional safety person at the T. That's on, again, our list of guests to have. One of the simple things about commuter rail not to do is don't open the door yourself, because it slows down the train, because the commuter rail conductor has to go and check the door and close it for safety. That kind of thing can affect a trip. We've had input into some of the major projects, like the government center shut down. We were asked by the T, was it our opinion that it was better to close down for a shorter period of time or keep it open for a longer, more expensive project? So that was a case where the general manager came to us and asked us to weigh in on that. But we've certainly been involved with overseeing virtually every project in various ways. I mean, the Wollaston station project that's going on right now, I don't think we've overseen it particularly.
I walk back the oversee. We've overseen every project.
No, reviewed. Yeah,
overseen is a
we've considered, discussed.
We've been lucky enough to get updates on many of these.
Okay. Well, I'm trying not to dissuade the new members.
There's a line between. Yeah, I don't want to overspeak for the role we play. I think we can play. I think we can maybe expand upon that role. I think a lot of us would like to expand upon that role, but we've been lucky enough to get updates, often materials that that they create in-house for in-house presentations that they bring to us, and then we'd ask critical questions. But to call that, how you want to define oversight is up to you.
Fair enough. Maybe I won't go item by item, but because it's already 6:25. But does anybody, having looked at this list, have any specific questions about?
Well, I have a general observation that tourists have a really hard time with shutdowns. Usually, the daily riders do a pretty good job of figuring out what's going on quickly, but the visitors to the city have a very hard time. So that might be something to just flag for the T.
Yeah. Do people know the term wayfinding? Wayfinding and how good or bad it can be at the T is an ongoing struggle, an ongoing issue.
Yeah. I just got in touch with the T because I was at Haymarket, and what a nightmare. I don't go to Haymarket normally, but I was going to do something in the North End, and I couldn't find my way out. I just took one elevator somewhere and then took another elevator, and I know I'm getting old, but I still have a few neurons left.
I was going to ask, are all of these still relevant? Is there anything that's no longer going on?
I think except for the past projects, the major ones like Government Center, Beverly Drawbridge, the Green Line, tie replacement, Old Colony tie, I mean, except for those big projects, everything else is still, again, correct me if I'm wrong, single-person train operations hasn't yet come to the Green Line. So even though it has happened on red and orange, and if you don't know, single-person meaning that it's just one operator up at the front as opposed to the two that it used to be, one person operating the train, one person operating the doors, and they didn't cross duties. That may happen in the future for Green Line, depending on a lot of issues. So I don't think anything here is not still relevant.
But you kind of just hop from the shutdowns to further down on the agenda here.
Yeah, I don't want to be boring. I don't want to waste people's time. But at the same time, there's a lot of highlights we could call.
One that's still got its finishing days left is the Salt and Pepper Bridge project, Red Line.
That's right, yeah, the
And it's
Longfellow
almost
Bridge.
ready, right?
Yeah, I think the MBTA impact is complete. I don't think there's any.
Is there still a slow zone at the Boston end?
I was just over it a couple days ago,
I don't
and
think there is. I'm pretty sure that.
And no more weekend shutdowns?
Well,
No,
the
I
whole
thought
bridge
it
is
was
a,
gonna be May.
the whole bridge is a slow
Summer,
zone
and I
also.
think it
It used to be 40, and now it's 25.
permanently though?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just like this curve south of Central.
Well, we can get an update on the speed restrictions. I mean, certainly if we can get it back, if they can get it back to the 40-mile-an-hour it used to be, that would help immensely.
I'm sorry?
It was pretty good today.
Oh, good.
Is it a quick thing?
Yeah, I actually, you said about comments about these things.
Well, if it's comments, can you wait till the end?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So if we are interested in anything in particular, when would we?
The next subcommittee meeting, or if you can't make it because the schedule conflicts, email it to the co-chairs or the whole mailing list. There's really no time to, there's no bad time to discuss anything that's interesting you. Yeah, that's partly why I wanted, again, that's why I wanted to bring all this up, because we've done so much and looked at so much in the past 15 years of the Rock that there's a lot that may be relevant again and we don't know, we don't catch.
How's that blue line to Lynn come?
I'm not going to hold my breath. Yeah, the expansions debate. I mean, that was brought up before about why are the South Coast Rail people seeming to be at the throats of the North-South Rail Link people. I think it's just competing for very constrained resources, and pretty much that's about it.
Always the pros versus each other, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as a brief history, South Coast Rail was supposed to be a relatively cheap, simple project. It's going to be like $300 million. It's now up to, I think, $2 billion, $3 billion. So it is no longer cheap and simple, and they're looking for cheaper and simpler alternatives for a project that would serve something like, 3,000 new riders both ways?
Yeah. Yeah, as far as a per capita return on investment, it's a bit, I don't want to say sketchy, but I mean, I'm biased because I live in Lynn, but I think the Blue Line extension to Lynn would have a much bigger impact for a more environmental justice impact, as well as better for the low income people in North Shore. Yep.
So I'm sorry to make so many comments today, but
That's all right.
on the expansions, you haven't listed North-South. I think you probably should list that. A lot of the conflict on that is just that, and I think Arcady got into this earlier, but you wouldn't redo South Station the same way if you were going to go ahead with North-South. It would just be a huge waste of money. The other one that I bring up, Karen isn't always a fan of it, but the Urban Ring Project has potential to come from Harvard Alston and BU Alston through Kendall Square, basically through Sullivan Square, past Wynn.
No, don't get me wrong.
No, wait,
That
let me
part I
finish,
like.
okay.
That part I
Okay,
like.
let me finish. And then also to get up to Lynn. And I just want to say, because it comes right around to Chelsea, it can keep going. The difficulty is backtracking from Harvard Alston to Longwood Medical, and figuring out how you're going to make that turn to make it connect. But I just want to throw out a footnote on this, and I thought about this when you're talking about West Station. There are an awful lot of people that want to get to Kendall Square, right? Kendall Square is like the golden goose right now. So we had a lieutenant governor who twice tried to get the Worcester cranes to go to Kendall Square. One of the main reasons for putting West Station would be to connect Harvard Alston, BU, and Kendall Square. The North Station developers want to capture that for Boston Properties development at North Station, as opposed to following the North Ring, urban ring around to the North Shore. So there's even though it may not be written up that way, there's a lot of people trying to tap into the magic of Kendall Square, and also it is getting job congested, and if people think it's a good idea to continue to be leading edge in life sciences and tech, then you probably have to spread that to other geographies. I know, when alternative people push back on gentrification caused by jobs, if we didn't have jobs, we'd have more affordable housing. So.
Yep.
But I just wanted to flag urban ring, especially the Kendall Square issue.
What's the urban ring?
So the urban ring is basically taking the Grand Junction, which exists and is used to connect the different radial lines or to ferry the locomotives from the southern commuter rail system to the Blue Engine Terminal in Somerville, or to get the freight trains up to Chelsea Produce Market. So that corridor exists in a under-maintained condition, and it can be double-tracked all the way from Harvard-Alston up through MIT, through Kendall Square, through Somerville, through Sullivan Square. My understanding is there's some pushback on that from some people who are within the state transportation agencies. But you can go right to the north side of the Mystic River and then along to Chelsea, and then you can make the turn up to Lynn.
And then what sort of?
Well, right now there is some heavy rail on it. It's like one or two freight or random trains a day. So you either have to have an awful lot of control over collision, or it's all got to be heavy rail.
And you've omitted the fact from JFK, it's a ring. It goes from JFK all the way up. So
you would want to wrap in UMass Boston as well, and then make the connection through to Logan. I mean, that was the initial idea, was that phase 3 would be all rail, and we kind of got stuck on phase 2.
So this was actually a proposed project by the T about 10 years ago, I want to say.
Well,
urban
there
ring.
was a battle.
Yeah.
We wanted to not do the Green Line in order to focus on that.
And I think the proposal was for buses for most of it, including a tunnel for buses through Longwood.
Well,
yes, but let me, I was on the committee, and so what would happen, the Environmental Justice Committee would have to get off the bus at Ruggles and change over to another bus because there was no connection between Roxbury, Dorchester, and so it was a scam. The Environmental Justice Community was going to be, it would just look good on paper, and then they made a silly little bus lane because the feds wouldn't fund anything like this unless it was 10% dedicated bus lane. And so there was a bus lane of like just a short distance, just so they could meet the requirement of the feds. It was totally not. I mean, the urban ring was theoretically a good idea, but where it ended up was not. The environmental justice community wasn't going to get squat. Because people that work in the Longwood medical area would take a different bus. They wouldn't get on this whether you have to get off. Anytime there's a transfer, if you look on projected thing, there's a 10-minute penalty. So when they figure out how long people are going to take and will they do it, they always factor in this 10 minutes for a transfer. Just saying. And I do get on this soapbox,
so basically, this was originally an idea of George Thrush, who runs the design department at Northeastern, or has from time to time, urban designer. And the 8 communities that it would go through formed a contract between all 8 of them. Boston being the biggest, but there are 7 others. And pursued it, and there were 3 phases to it. The first phase was a highly balkanized bus system. The second phase was the CT2 buses that exist now, plus you could throw in what's happening in Chelsea and that kind of thing. So that was phase 2. Phase 3 was a unified rail-based system. And a lot of people, including myself and then Conservation Law Foundation staff member Stephanie Pollack, wanted to skip phase 2 and go to phase 3. To have the single unified system. So basically you would just know that in either direction you could get on and you could complete as much of that loop as you wanted to.
And that data sets, that research
Yeah, it's still around. It all used to be pretty accessible at the Transportation Library, which is no longer here, but it may be online.
Yeah, I don't want to be optimistic about that particular project data, but it seems like whenever I do Google for something 10, 15, 20 years, yeah, it seems like I get pretty good results.
Yeah.
Whether that's just luck of what I'm looking for, I don't know.
It's exactly the kind of thing that other world-class cities have been doing. Like London is working on a big connector in a circle, and quite a few other cities are working on those things now. Arcadia would know more than me, but.
Just for what it's worth, the Amazon in Boston plan, we might know more. Well, hopefully we'll know more this calendar year, and if we do find Amazon coming to the Suffolk Downs area, then I'm personally going to be leading the charge on some deeper analysis, because I've got a stake in it, because I come from the North Shore.
I think we all have a stake in it.
Yeah.
Because I think they would probably help with the transportation system.
We need a counter every time you mention North Shore or Lynn or.
Yep. I try to admit that I'm biased for the Blue Line extension and, you know, improving the Suffolk Downs area, but, you know. Any more comments or suggestions, discussion about these, or, you know, the finer points of it?
Point of progress, the commuter rail crew mobile devices, they've started piloting.
Mm-hmm.
They have at least one that's being piloted now, where someone on board can take credit cards and do the sales.
Yeah, that's actually not what I was meaning on here. When I wrote the mobile devices on commuter rail here, I was just talking about the iPhones that have replaced, I think, 80% of the paperwork that the commuter rail people used to do. But yes, but you're absolutely right. I have heard also about the AFC 2.0 readers there's at least one being tried out on commuter rail.
Just a regular credit, like swipe reader, is what I understand.
It doesn't have a barcode reader as well, so it's just a swipe. Interesting.
Again, yesterday, Grabowskis talked about they're piloting so that they can take credit card payments on board.
Okay.
But not so you can tap your Charlie card.
I don't believe so.
Then maybe
this
that's
is like, because tapping. My understanding is that taking Charlie cards on the commuter rail would be something considered with the new fare collection system.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're saying that this is not part of AFC 2.0? These new readers?
Like,
I see.
They can swipe a credit card and make a.
So it's simply a way of taking credit card payments that they couldn't do now, but it's not coupled to the new fare collection. Okay,
I don't know how it's related to the new fare collection system.
I will get more information on that. That's great.
It's in the update yesterday.
Excellent. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. With regard to the iPhones that conductors carry, there was a big outcry when they first were deployed, because a lot of the commuter rail conductors found them to be much, much slower to do data entry. And if you're not familiar with the kind of data entry that commuter rail conductors have to do, because of federal regulations, at the beginning, just one example, at the beginning of every trip, they have to log every single vehicle number of the train that they're going to take out. They've got to log any kind of condition issues. They've got to have a full, I forget the terminology now. There's FRA mandated paperwork that describes any issues along the line where there's a special speed restriction. The amount of paperwork that conductors had to not only have to refer to, but also to fill out, was huge. I believe it's, like I said, 80% now electronic on the mobile devices, if not more, but the reception was poor, and it was a very, very time-consuming process at first. That's why I thought it was worthy of reinvestigating at some point, because if it was slowing down the conductors, was that impacting trip on-time performance? I wasn't sure. I think it's to be determined. Arkady, anything else? I mean, we could open it up to public comment, because you had some comments that you wanted to make. Is there anything else that people want to cover before we move into public comment. It doesn't mean we have to break early or stop discussion. But I don't want to belabor what's on this list, and certainly we've got other people who might want to speak, like our regulars, like Barry. Yeah, so go ahead. Tell us your name again, just so we can.
My name is Chris Clemens, and my comment was, well, it's not much of a comment, it's more of an idea. So, you know, a lot of buses that are not in Boston, private-owned buses, have like a 6-month pass or a yearly pass. I was thinking, you know, why doesn't the T have that? You know, I take the train every day, and you know, I see these prices for commuter rail where people are paying over $300 for a monthly pass. They could use that better for a whole year than just for just 1 month. I think that's a little much, but
You mean you're suggesting they pay $300 for a year?
$300 and like, because I live all over Worcester, so it's like $365.
Do you know the subsidy per passenger for the commuter rail for each trip?
Well, I get like a 10 ride.
No, I'm talking on what the T subsidizes for every trip you take.
Well, it's like
you are not paying what it costs.
Right. Well, her point is that what the ticket price is typically on, I think, commuter rail, again, Rob might be able to correct me, I think it's less than 50% for a typical commuter rail ride. So in other words, if the ticket price, say, is $2, it's actually costing the T $4 to run that trip. So that's one of the...
I think we're getting a little off track here. I think
yeah,
the suggestion is just to have an annual pass.
Right.
You can buy one pass for the whole year.
You pay three
times 12.
Times 12.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
or a small discount for that.
Maybe
I don't know. It could just, you know, serve all of the tea.
Yeah, I wanted to reinforce the idea of having an annual pass, I think, is worth investigating.
Pass is enough.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if someone is going to be riding for the next 12 months, if they didn't mind paying in advance and getting a discount that's reflective of that upfront payment.
This is a good one to, let's not break new ground here, benchmark
Yeah.
it. If anybody wants to do the research, if they can find any other major transit system that offers yearly passes.
All of England.
England does?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh,
That was easy.
My grandmother lives over there.
Did somebody just, like Adidas or someone just released like a special edition sneaker that had like a yearly transit pass like tied into the laces? Oh, so dope.
Yeah, Switzerland, you can buy a pass for the whole country, for like everything in the country. It's like $3,000 a year or something.
This does sound like we're not a luxury item we're talking about now.
Well, is that sneaker with the pass just like a general purpose
Yeah,
pass?
it was. They only made like 500 of them or something.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like it's a working pass for the year that you buy it.
Well, I don't know if you heard.
It's just like a relic for the
yeah.
like, I don't know, 2 months ago.
There was a small startup in Boston that, with the official endorsement of the MBTA, came out with a Charlie card ring. It was a working Charlie card element in a ring. It was endorsed by the MBTA, fully approved, and you could tap your ring on the turnstile.
Yeah, what happened?
I haven't heard about that in a while.
Wait, we did that?
It was a startup company. It was an independent bunch of people who said, well, wait, we can make a ring that does this. I mean, the theory of RFID is that you could encapsulate that into anything. I mean, you could make a hat. You could make mittens. I mean, seriously. Yeah.
Can I just put it in my wrist? Just kidding.
So, anyway.
Those were super dope. And like it was actually the pass that was like, oh, it was really cool. You actually
I was asking, what's the meaning of so dope? I was just kidding.
Yeah. I'd be worried about
Before we get too far off track.
Trying to tap the reader, though, I mean, that would be a lot of
that would be
hip injuries trying
I
to raise your leg that
I
high.
think they have like those sensors. I don't know.
Where was that, though? Was that England?
Germany.
Germany.
And it
Okay,
was
that's
for,
very
like,
cool.
Berlin Fashion Week.
They don't have fare gates.
There's no fare gates in Germany.
Just use
No.
paper passes. So you didn't have to like tap it. It was like
Oh, so
you
it just
put
says
it
okay.
on a piece of paper.
Great. It's still super dope.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
All right, any other public comments?
Yeah, well, let me just reinforce. That's the kind of thing, like, if it gets you, like, jazzed up about a concept that might come to the T, you know, I'm going to reinforce that. Yeah.
You know, I take it every day, and, you know, this should cost money. I have to pay over $80 just for 2 passes.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
So, thank you.
Yeah, Barry, please. Yeah, Anyone else want to speak besides Barry? Yeah. Go ahead.
Barry Steinberg, Barry Steinberg Association for Public Transportation. This is an idea I got, and I just wanted to bounce it past you. We all know about the derailment on the Red Line the other day, and it is my impression that what happened was that the car was just sort of bouncing, and bounced off the track. Now this is not the first time that I've seen this. I've been in cars on the Red Line that would be bouncing, and they hit the rail with a bang. Now that's an incipient derailment.
Right.
Now,
Barry, why don't we take this one offline? I believe the failure there was the last car on the set had a motor failure. So it wasn't like the cars were just bouncing along. It was that as it was pulling into a station, the last car on the set, the wheels froze up. And that's why it bounced. It was because literally he was being...
You think that was not a bucking or something?
No, it was literally that. Like it'd be like your rear wheels on your car suddenly stopped while your front wheels were still going.
Okay.
And dragging the back.
I'll drop that.
I mean, the answer to it is new Red Line cars.
Okay, I'll drop that if that was indeed the reason. Okay.
I'll double check that for the next meeting.
Yeah, well, I'll just follow up on that. I know that suspension issues can be very serious. Case in point, on the commuter rail one time, the coach where I was bouncing up and down like an old pickup truck on a dirt road, and I drew this to the attention of one of the conductors, and I followed up with him later. He said that coach was taken out of service immediately and sent to have the airbag repaired. The airbag apparently being the cushioning element in the coach, in the truck of the coach.
My question is you have one operator in the front.
Are they aware of the ride conditions? Yeah.
Now my question is, if that was happening in the front, he'd slow down immediately. However, if this is happening in one of the rear cars, he would have no way of knowing if this is happening. And this would probably be a good reason for us to be pressing that emergency button. Not the thing we...
Yeah, not the emergency stop, but,
but
the intercom button.
The intercom button.
Yeah. I think this goes towards educating riders with again, the do's and don'ts, and encouraging people, if you see a problem, do hit the button and talk to the operator.
That's as far as I want to go.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ma'am?
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, thanks for entertaining the comments. When you were talking earlier about the commuter rail projects and the idea that's going to need a capital partnership, I was wondering, is anybody, you probably are, I'm just not aware of it, reaching out to a lot of the large employers throughout the metropolitan area, and particularly engaging, if you think about what had gone on around the New Year's time frame, a lot of lost employee productivity, right? We grant a lot of people can telecommute, but a lot of people are still needing to get to the office. And so you had triple failures between the commuter rail and the subway and buses, which you would expect. So I just was wondering if there's any kind of plan, you're reaching out to State Street Bank and to Liberty Mutual and some of the larger employers and coalescing them as partners as a way to really force these changes, because they're the ones who really impact you.
That's a tough one. I think for the Rock, we are limited in resources and we don't really have the outreach to be able to do that. Certainly, we're not prevented from doing that. And certainly if members of our committee are interested in doing that, I'm sure Arkady, as the co-chairs, would encourage that. We haven't thus far, but
I think a different alternative would be for us to propose a recommendation to the T regarding establishing some kind of
very good
corporate advisory council or something of that nature with the suggestion that members of this advisory council, just as they would in any kind of development areas like downtown crossing, would kick in something as part of that. So maybe we can formulate and think through a suggestion from this organization up to the T regarding that.
That's very good. I wouldn't have thought of that. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks for answering that. We are trying to reach out to the head of the Boston Chamber of Commerce. He doesn't have his name right now, but we had a conversation with John Adanucci about creative financing possibilities and talking to the Boston Chamber of Commerce was one thing that we said that we would try to follow up on. The current CEO was a general manager for the T, very brief period, and and every time I see him on usually NECN, and he is very pro-transit and very much.
We had briefly, and I can't remember if we had tracked this or it was just an area we looked into a few years ago. It was the idea of renaming some of the stations, right? It was
yes.
Rather than downtown crossing, it would be Dunkin' Donuts crossing or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think he would be on board for a much more significant contribution from businesses. So we.
And then what are they? For what is it? Just to make sure that's the workers there.
Well, we're going to reach out to him and see what ideas he has, and I also know that Paul Regan, who is the executive director for the MBTA advisory board, he is into this notion of value capture, so that when you build transit, there is going to be an increase in property values, and that there should be a way to get some money that is anticipated from that increase in value and use that to build out your system. And so apparently New York does that. I need to talk with him more, but he's actually going to come to the CIF meeting soon after the advisory board does their analysis or review of the operating budget. So we have him in probably May and can drill into that some more. But you also be a person that might be able to give some input into those notions. And you can certainly reach out to him independently of us. So it's Paul Regan, MBTA Advisory Board, and it's mbtaadvisoryboard.org.
Yeah. Wick?
Yeah. Also on this, so the regional land use plan has not been done in quite a few years. Metropolitan Area Planning Council does the regional land use plans here. But the last time they did it, I was on the steering committee for 8 years, and they bring in outside reviewers to compare how Boston might operate compared to other metropolitan areas of similar scale. And their consensus was that Boston had more brain power assets than any other city they looked at, but much less cooperation within the region than the other place they looked. That the eds and meds were just focused on their own stuff, and mostly MAPC, like the MPO, interacts with the municipalities, but not with the business leaders or the institutional leaders. So that is stark contrast to other large cities, and that would be exactly, I think, what you're talking about.
Just maybe a way might be coming up with a link on the website someplace that gives people a place to send comments to a collection point. So you start to pressure from the sides, right, top down, bottom up, or whichever way you want to look at it.
But you also can get, you also can use leadership from the corporations or the academic institutions who want to give part of their time to making sure the metropolitan area is functioning for all their employees and for other reasons. So
the employees just have to pressure them to do that.
Yeah.
I just want to do a time check here.
Yep. Exactly what I was going to do.
I would do a last call for public comment and we'll wrap this up.
It's like you're reading my mind. Ma'am, did you want to have any comment in?
I'm here because my son is here.
That's great.
Chris.
Thank you.
When they had those hearings, I will say something. When they had those hearings a few years ago, I brought written ideas to the MBTA. I don't think they were ever implemented about rebalancing things in terms of the buses. to make it more equitable and give longer running times to certain lines that are ended at 7 o'clock.
If you still have
I want
copies,
to give those to you again.
please,
Can
if
I
you
get
still have
your-
copies.
Can I get your name?
Yeah. Oh, just send it to the main email address. roc@mbtaroc.org.
But what's your name?
I'm Stefan.
Stefan what?
Wunsch. W-U. It's probably easier to copy.
Stefan, all right.
Yeah. But again, the best way to communicate with us is through the main email address. That way it doesn't go to any one person. It goes to all of us when you write to roc@mbtaroc.org.
And before you came in, we were told there's going to be a bus planning coming up that the T is going to run that you'd probably be very interested in.
Right.
And I don't have any dates yet. Apparently in the next couple of weeks it's going to be called the Better Bus Project.
Great.
So, well, we don't know how great it is. We'll find out when we go to one of those meetings.
When you start listening to the passengers, then you'll find out how great it is.
No, I mean, I don't know how great the meetings will be. They may be great, or they may be listening and listening.
One last question. Did anyone leave this yellow notepad last month? It only had a couple of pages of notes. I couldn't identify anyone on it. Want to take a look?
Yeah, sure, please, yeah. Okay. There's a guy with a yellow notepad right
All right, I was thinking maybe it was yours. I think we're coming up on 7, so we'll call for an adjourn. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
And a second. Thank you everyone very much, and thank you again for putting up with us with this very modified agenda in light of the GM not being able to make it. I thank you for your patience while we mucked around with the schedule agenda.